Hi, welcome to the channel, and it's another Comments from the Couch. This week, of course, is the arrival of the film Schumacher on Netflix, and that's what I'm planning on watching and giving thoughts on, and if nothing else, I get to watch what should be a great film. My thoughts on Michael as a whole, when I first started watching Formula One, it was the mid to late 80s, and I didn't really, there were the established guys and whatever else, and obviously it's great seeing the likes of Senna, Prost, Mansell, PK, and everyone, you know. But it got to the point where it was the same people winning all the time, and it's like 4 different people, don't get me wrong, but the first person that really caught my attention, and I suppose in the same way people view like Max Verstappen now, was Michael. This new young guy taking it to the established guys. And I got excited about that. I've been a Ferrari fan for a very long time. Not mostly because of Michael, although bright red car, not always going to plan. There's being a Ferrari fan is interesting. So I am very much looking forward to this film. I hope, obviously, that it's that thing. On the one hand, you want to watch a film showing all aspects of a character and being very honest. On the other hand, especially with the circumstances of after Michael's accident and stuff, that part of the thing is almost like an homage and a tribute to him. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of balance they've struck with it, I think. So anyway, let's get into it. Well, yeah. I mean, any good racing documentary, any documentary about any person that, you remember, or an important person in history, and, what they done, what they achieved, who they were, basically should leave you sort of kind of feeling like a bit, oh, wow. I started writing off detailed notes for about the first half of the film, and by the time it got to the second half of the film, it was like kind of chapter titles almost it limited itself to. So talking about the film, it starts off with like the 2 pillars of Michael's life almost, where you've got like, the home video of the family, Michael at home, the father, the husband, and then it cuts from that to the Michael going through the Monaco tunnel, and the precision and the focus and the concentration driving Monaco, going on from there. Michael talks about how basically, his sort of goal almost in life is like 100% this, and that's the target, and he couldn't imagine living his life of aiming basically for any lower than that, which explains so much of his personality when you think, how driven, how focused, to the point of almost destruction at times he sort of was with his driving and everything, and how it was sort of like he had so much difficulty sometimes seeing some of the things he'd done or incidents he'd been involved in, because he's just so focused on that moment, and difficult to, and later on in the film it's talking about obviously Horev, and it talks about like the incident with Coulthard and their sort of classic in '98 in Spa, and that's very much almost classic examples of this 100% focus on the best result and nothing less, because he's looking at that, not, he blamed initially Villeneuve for that contact, because it was almost a disbelief or an inability to believe, or he came from so far back it must have been a late lunge or something. It wasn't until he got back to the garage and he actually had a chance to sit back and watch and see what everyone else had seen. He was like, ah. Which is just I'm getting completely out of sync of the order of the film or whatever else, which is not where I'd originally planned on going with it. But it goes from talking about that 100%, the need for 100%, to the footage of Spa in '91, of Rolf, his father, and various other people talking about how almost lucky Michael was to be able to get into Formula One with just the way things had played out and the circumstances that led up to it. How quickly the speed of everything, the turnaround from there to signing for Benetton to a year later getting his first win, and how he hadn't originally wanted to be kind of famous because just privacy, wanting his privacy, and the life, the press, everything kind of took over a bit. And that's a large part of why what people saw when he was at the track or when he was working, or what we saw on television, was such a sort of professional, quite almost stern, clinical Michael, because he didn't really want to deal with the press. He didn't, he just wanted to go racing and focus on doing the thing he loved doing and trying to do it to the best of his ability, which I think I can kind of relate to that. I don't do YouTubing because I ever want to be famous at it. I do it because I like talking racing. So, no fear of getting famous in my case, but, so the first one in '92, and following on from that, starts talking more about his background, where he came from, early family photographs, this sort of thing of him in early karts that his dad had put together for him, coming from very little money, relatively speaking, so that when they were doing karting and stuff at circuits, it'd basically be using second-hand tyres they'd found out of the bit that some other people had put in the bin, which obviously when you're not having a lot that you can race with, you get into the mindset of having to push everything, having to maximise everything, which again we saw later on in his career for a lot better and for worse as well sometimes. So, early memories as well from some other people. Mika Häkkinen was talking about how he remembered racing him in karting, and how it was a bit of a home circuit for Michael, but how he knew every line. He was the guy. How everyone else you'd see and they'd have a lap where they'd do something wrong. Michael was right every time. And Michael talking about how he'd potentially have to stay racing go-karts forever because, again, it's money. He didn't think he'd have enough, he didn't think he'd be able to. But if you do enough, you can attract the right people sometimes, and in his case he attracted Willy Weber. My pronunciation of names is terrible, and in my defence I've been up about 20 hours at this point, so I apologise for this. And sort of in the same way that Nicholas Todd would go on to help Charles Leclerc in more recent history, that sort of thing happened for Michael as well. Where new people could make contacts, could open doors, could get him onto the ladder for Formula Racing, which off his own back Michael couldn't, and his family just couldn't have done. And then it cuts to early memories of his wife, and as I said, struggling with the press and the fame, and just wanting to a normal life and to go racing. From there, it's to the early challenges in Formula One and finding himself at the front racing against the likes of Ayrton Senna. And Senna and these guys were people who 5 years before he'd had posters of them on his wall and stuff, and now he's racing and in some cases occasionally crashing with them. And as I said, that's sort of what I remember as this new young charging racer taking it to the established names, which a new energy to the sport, you know. But from there it's to 94, and Ross Brawn talking about how the team weren't kind of ready for 94, because you suddenly had this t-shirt company with this young German driver beating the likes of Ferrari, McLaren, Williams, and they just weren't quite prepared for it or how to deal with it. The film I mean, I knew it was coming because I'd heard about it off Twitter and wherever else. But I can imagine if you'd been watching the film and you weren't aware of it, 28 minutes in, it shows the Ayrton Senna crash, and it doesn't shy away from showing it. Normally you see films and they like slow down and stop just before like the incident, but this didn't, and I'm not sure. I know a lot of people have been a bit uncomfortable about that. I'm not sure how I feel at all, whether it was really necessary to include the whole of it in its graphic entirety, So that's my main minus about the film, to be honest with you. It's difficult. But I mean, the thing is, it plays such a key part in like Michael's behaviour for some of that year to a certain extent, because he was saying he was sort of going to races, and whereas his normal thing is like just the car, drive it, believe in yourself, your talent, your whatever, you can take this corner this way, that, and to have faith that he could do it. His brain was doing that thing when you've suffered sort of like shock or surprise or whatever else, or someone you admire and respect and that you'd looked up to has been involved in that, and he was finding himself going into corners going, if I go off here it could all go horribly wrong, I could crash. There's some of the interviews in it are incredibly open and raw during this period. I mean, it skips over a lot from the 94 season, to be honest with you, like the disqualification and the race bans for the floor and things like that. But it's tried to tell so much as a story. I mean, the film is an hour and 53 minutes long, and that's by no means the only bit it skips over quite a bit of. In dealing with Adelaide, I mean, yeah. Dealing with Adelaide, they've got Damon Hill in, giving his 2p for stuff, Bear in mind, fighting for the championship, he was the guy who Michael collided with. I still think that Michael was trying to straighten the car out, having come off the grass, having come out of the corner, and was basically just, mind was a bit on, what am I doing, and got it completely wrong. But as Damon said himself in that interview, if you put him in a car with a points advantage and the guy he was fighting came up the inside of him, what would he do? He said himself, he doesn't really know. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of them. Well, how often do we see it even now? Maybe not for championship fights, but we've just seen like 2 incidents between Lewis and Max this year, and there's nothing to say it couldn't be some, one of them. But I appreciate, my own opinions on Michael are differing to other people's, so fair enough. It skips over 95 just because that didn't really add anything to the story, I suppose. He won another title, but then it's like the tale of the trials at Ferrari almost seem to be like the most part of this film, because obviously he went there in 96 as the world champion, and Ferrari were in a state that were coming off the back of some horrible years, and the 96 car was utterly terrible, but he managed to pull some magnificent performances out of it to get some wins that most people figured that car really wasn't capable of at all. 97, pressure was on, car was better, there was a chance. As I said earlier, Michael came out of that incident and got to the garage, and he fully believed that Jack had crashed into him. And it wasn't until afterwards and he had the chance to look back at it, it was like, oh. So again, it's that 100% focus on what you're doing and thinking ahead, and yeah, anyway. But him enjoying the challenge of being racing and things. And then obviously you had 98 and 99, when it doesn't go into depth about them seasons, but it does show like key issues like the collision with Coulthard at Spa in 98, and again the calming down after that eventually, and obviously the crash in 99 which derailed that season. So he's gone to Ferrari with all these expectations, he's the world champion, he's going to lead them back, and 96, 97, 98, 99, and then in 2000 it's sort of like kind of must win, for him to sort of cement, had to win. And obviously the build up and tension, and he got it. You see Monza where he's like told he's tied with like Ayrton Senna for race wins, and he breaks down. There's sort of such a release of almost tension there. Mika Häkkinen sort of saying we should take a break and stuff, and then eventually getting that title win and just the sheer relief almost from doing it. The film skirts over the rest of like his time at Ferrari practically in about that 5-6, not very long at all. It doesn't talk about his other titles at all, or any of the, really, or much in the way of anything of what happened during them seasons. So there's, and talks about retirement, and you see him going skydiving and stuff. Basically, it's like while he needed a break from racing, he still needed to be doing something, to have some adrenaline kind of thing or whatever. He returned obviously with Mercedes in 2010, thinking, just trying it out again, is this where I need to be? And it became clear kind of to him that it was job done, that he didn't really have anything more to offer, that ultimately he was better off at home with his family. And the film ends obviously with what happened in the skiing resort and the comments from his family. And they talk as openly as they can do about the situation of Michael, not going into any details regarding the state of injuries or whatever, but it's very clear that he's not okay, and he's never really likely to be who he was and stuff. The way they talk about the memories of Michael, and very powerful stuff. I mean, to us fans, he was like a hero, driver, driven personality, fierce competitor, always after like yeah. But obviously then to his family, he was, husband, father, hero again, but in a different way. And when you hear Mick talking at the end there, you kind of feel every word when he says he'd give up everything to have that conversation about, racing with his dad and stuff. And you really feel that. So, what do we think about the film? It's a very good, very, very good film. It sort of goes back to my earlier question, is what type of film does it make? They skipped over a lot of the controversial stuff. They did. But some of it is just because, the film was an hour and 53 minutes long as it was. And they skipped over a lot of other things as well. As I said, most of the titles that he had at Ferrari were covered in about 6 minutes of footage. So the film in itself was more sort of like almost about the struggles of like trying to turn Ferrari around, and where they came from and him as a person. And I mean, because we only ever see what is presented to us on television, so Michael being a private person, what all we saw ever was just like cold, clinical, especially in the UK, of course, because German racing driver against the plucky Brits was quite often how it's portrayed, or what have you. So Michael was never necessarily portrayed as well here as he may have been in, say, Germany either, or Italy either. So he was quite often the enemy almost. So we don't always see how drivers or people who are famous in general, who and how they actually are. And I think this film sort of has made a great effort to try and show that, the duality of his personality and who he was, and it's a love letter to him, and it is, and absolutely great for that. I mean, the film Senna is not exactly the world's most balanced film, but it's still a superb film. So if we can appreciate where it comes from, this film, and understand that and accept it for that, then it's an excellent film. And I recently recommend it to anyone who wants to see it, if anyone hasn't by now. I used to buy films on DVD. I used to have a great collection of racing films and stuff on DVD, and now everything is on like streaming service. Honestly, the reason I have Netflix now is because this film was coming out and I wanted to see it. Yeah. And with that thought, I'll leave you. Thank you very much for watching. If you still are at this point, take care of yourselves, and bye bye for now.